There is a version of your life that most men your age will never find. Not because it isn't available to them, but because they were told to want something else. They were handed a script early on, and most of them have been following it without question ever since. Find a partner. Stay coupled. Measure your stability by whether someone is beside you. And for a long time, that script made sense. But something shifts after 60. The rules that once applied begin to quietly work against you, and most men never stop to ask why. They just keep following the script, wondering why something still feels off. Here is what nobody is saying clearly enough. The pursuit of a girlfriend after 60, the traditional relationship model, the one you were taught to want, may be the single thing standing between you and the most powerful, attractive, and alive version of yourself. Not because connection is wrong, not because love doesn't exist at this age, but because the structure of that pursuit carries a hidden cost. And by the end of this video, you are going to see exactly what that cost is, in 5 specific ways, including one that most men never consider, and it might be the most important thing I tell you today. You've probably watched it happen to someone you know, a man you respected, sharp, self-possessed, interesting, and then, 6 months into a new relationship, something in him went quiet. It wasn't dramatic. There was no argument, no visible breaking point. He just became slightly smaller. His opinions got softer. His stories started including her preferences. His weekends reorganized around her comfort. And the man who once seemed fully formed began to look like a draft of himself. You noticed it. You may not have named it, but you saw it. What you were witnessing was identity erosion. And at 60, it happens faster and cuts deeper than it does at 35. Here is why that timing matters. When a man is in his 30s, his identity is still being shaped. He is figuring out who he is through experience, through relationships, through trial. A romantic partnership at that stage can actually contribute to identity formation. It adds texture. But by 60, you have spent decades building something specific. You have a clear sense of your values, your pace, your way of moving through the world. That structure is not rigid, it is earned. And when a new relationship enters that structure, it does not simply add to what is there. It begins, slowly and almost imperceptibly, to renegotiate it. The psychology here is well documented. Researchers who study long-term couple formation have consistently found that in newly formed relationships among older adults, the partner with the stronger social script for the relationship, usually the one with more clearly articulated expectations, gradually draws the other person's behavior toward their own preferences. This is not manipulation. It is not even intentional most of the time. It is just what relationships do when 2 established lives try to become one. The friction of difference gets resolved. And resolution almost always favors the more insistent pattern. What does this look like in daily life? You stop taking that long Saturday drive because she prefers to spend mornings together. You start watching things you have no interest in because it is easier than explaining your preferences again. You phrase your opinions more carefully because you have learned which ones create tension. None of these changes feel significant on their own. Each one seems like a small, reasonable accommodation. But you add them up across 6 months and you find yourself in a life that fits slightly wrong, like a jacket that is almost your size. Of course, compromise is part of any real relationship. That is not the argument here. The argument is about what happens when compromise starts from a place of an already fully formed self, and why the cost at this stage is higher than most men calculate. That erosion does not happen in isolation. It accelerates the moment the relationship becomes visible to the world. And that is where the second reason becomes relevant. The moment a relationship goes official, something strange happens. People stop seeing you. They start seeing you and her. And those are not the same thing. This is not a minor social inconvenience. It is the beginning of what psychologists call identity merger, the process by which 2 individuals become, in the perception of their social world, a single social unit. For men over 60, this merger carries a specific and underappreciated cost. Your individual social presence, the way people engaged with you as a distinct person, sought your perspective, included you as yourself, begins to be filtered through the couple identity. Invitations arrive for both of you or neither of you. Conversations that used to happen between you and a friend now happen between you, your friend, and the implicit presence of your relationship. Your social footprint shrinks from one whole person to one half of a pair. And here is what makes this particularly costly at this stage of life. The social identity you carry at 60 is something you built over decades. Your reputation, your network, your way of being known by people, these are mature, developed things. When identity merger begins to absorb them, you are not losing a draft. You are losing something finished. Now you might be thinking, isn't closeness the point? Isn't being a we what connection looks like? And sometimes yes. In the right relationship, at the right time, that merging can feel like belonging. But there is a critical difference between choosing to share your life and having your individual identity quietly replaced by a shared one. Most men in this age group experience the latter while believing they are getting the former. What you are losing in that merger is not just social, it is magnetic. The distinct, self-defined presence that made you interesting to people, including to women, begins to dissolve into the couple unit. And this connects directly to something that operates much deeper than social perception. There is a specific kind of man that women over 50 find almost impossible to stop thinking about. And the single most consistent thing about him is what he is not doing. He is not performing availability. He is not angling for connection. He is not organizing his life around whether someone chooses him. He simply exists, fully, unhurriedly, in a life that belongs entirely to himself. And that quality, that specific frequency of self-possession, is extraordinarily attractive to women at this stage of life. This is what researchers who study mate preference across age groups have described as self-sufficiency signaling. The set of behavioral cues that communicate to a potential partner that an individual has an autonomous, satisfying existence that does not require partnership to be complete. In younger men, this signal can sometimes read as emotional unavailability. But in a man over 60, it reads as something different. It reads as maturity, completeness, and genuine security. Here is what makes the girlfriend pursuit undermine this signal so directly. The girlfriend dynamic, by its very structure, makes you visible as someone who is seeking. And seeking, at this age, is the one thing that quietly erodes the frequency that attracts. A woman in her 50s or 60s who meets a man and discovers he is actively looking for a girlfriend registers something, not consciously, not as a judgment, but somewhere below thought that slightly lowers the perceived value. Not because she is calculating, because the brain responds to availability the way it responds to all abundant resources, with slightly less urgency. Think back to a time when you met someone who clearly needed your approval. Even if you liked them, there was something in the dynamic that felt slightly exhausting. The need itself created a kind of subtle pressure that made you want to step back rather than lean in. That same mechanism operates in female attraction. And the girlfriend pursuit, the openness to it, the willingness to reorganize around it, broadcasts that need at a frequency that women over 50 detect before a single word is spoken. Of course, this does not mean every man who is open to a relationship triggers this response. Context always matters. A man who is living fully, who has a rich and self-directed life, and who is open to connection from a place of abundance rather than lack, that reads completely differently. The problem is not desire. The problem is the girlfriend model itself, which tends to shift a man from abundance seeking to deficit filling. And that shift shows. Remember what I said at the very beginning, that the pursuit of a girlfriend might be the one thing quietly standing between you and the most powerful version of yourself. We are getting close to understanding exactly why. But first, there is one more dimension to this that most men never examine honestly. Most men don't calculate the cost until they're already paying it, and by then, the number is higher than they expected. The girlfriend dynamic carries a cost structure that is almost never discussed plainly before a man enters it, and the silence around that cost is itself part of the problem. Financial patterns are the most visible layer, but they are not the most significant. What develops in a relationship over time is a normalization of shared expenditure, restaurants, travel, experiences selected for two, that gradually adjusts a man's financial behavior away from his own priorities and toward the shared model. This is not inherently wrong, but for a man at 60 who has spent decades building financial autonomy and now has the freedom to deploy his resources exactly as he chooses, the drift can be significant. The less visible cost is emotional bandwidth. Every relationship requires a certain volume of cognitive and emotional space. Processing conflict, maintaining communication, tracking another person's emotional state, navigating the ongoing project of couplehood. At 60, your emotional bandwidth is a finite and genuinely valuable resource. You have goals, you have projects, you have friendships, you have inner work that a life well lived makes possible. The girlfriend model draws from the same reservoir that funds all of those things. And then there is the cost that men talk about least. The foreclosure of spontaneity. The ability to decide on a Tuesday afternoon to drive somewhere, to take a trip, to spend a weekend entirely alone, to reorganize your entire week around a sudden interest. That freedom is not a small thing. It is, for many men over 60, one of the most quietly cherished aspects of their current life. The girlfriend dynamic, with its implicit schedule of mutual consideration, gradually closes that spontaneous space. Not through conflict, just through the gentle accumulation of a second person's needs. None of this is a case against love. None of it is a case against connection. It is simply an honest accounting of what the girlfriend model costs, so that you can make a clear choice rather than a habitual one. And now we reach the reason I told you to pay attention to, because everything before this has been visible once you know where to look. But this last reason operates below the surface. It is the one that quietly determines the quality of every interaction you have with a woman, and most men have no idea it is even a factor. Here is what almost no one tells men over 60 about attraction, and I mean almost no one. The version of you that women find most compelling is not the version that needs them. It is the version that has become so fully, specifically, unhurriedly himself that a woman in his presence feels the pull of something rare. This is what I call the sovereignty signal, and it is the single most powerful thing a man over 60 can carry. Sovereignty, in this context, does not mean independence as a defense mechanism. It does not mean unavailability or emotional distance. It means something much more specific. The visible, unhurried sense that you belong entirely to yourself. That your life has a shape, a direction, a texture that predates any woman you might meet and will continue fully after she leaves the room. That your presence does not require her validation to feel solid. Women over 50, and research into female mate preference at this life stage consistently supports this, are acutely attuned to this quality in a way that younger women often are not. By 50, a woman has typically experienced what it feels like to be with a man who needed her to complete him. She knows the weight of that. She knows the subtle, grinding pressure of being someone's emotional anchor. And when she encounters a man who clearly does not need that from her, who is already full, already directed, already interesting, something in her responds that she cannot entirely explain. This is not a technique. It cannot be performed. A man who tries to project sovereignty as a strategy is doing the opposite of what creates it. Sovereignty is simply what happens when a man stops organizing his life around the question of whether a woman will choose him and starts organizing it around the question of who he actually wants to become. Now, here is the objection I know is forming. You might be thinking, isn't this just an argument for being alone? Isn't this a more sophisticated way of saying, don't bother? No, it is not. The argument is about sequencing and structure, not isolation. A man who is living sovereignly, who has reclaimed his identity, his social presence, his financial autonomy, his emotional bandwidth, and his spontaneous freedom, is not a man who has given up on connection. He is a man who has made himself genuinely worth connecting with. He is the man that the girlfriend pursuit was causing him to become less of with every passing month. The girlfriend model, at 60, tends to make a man pursue connection from a position of lack. Sovereignty makes him available to connection from a position of fullness. And women, at this age, with this level of experience, can feel the difference before a single word is exchanged. The man who is complete does not need to lean in. He does not need to perform interest. He simply is, and what he is draws people toward him with a force that availability could never generate. There is one more thing worth saying about this. Sovereignty is not permanent or automatic. It requires maintenance. It requires a man to keep choosing his own life, his own projects, his own pace, his own direction, even when something easier presents itself. But at 60, you have something you did not have at 40. You know exactly what your life looks like when it fits. You know the feeling of a week that belonged to you. And that knowledge is the foundation that sovereignty is built on. What this video has traced is not a list of warnings. It is a single, unified argument, moving from 5 different directions toward one central truth. Identity erosion, social repackaging, the collapse of attraction through structural availability, the hidden cost of the girlfriend model, and the sovereignty signal. These are not 5 separate problems. They are 5 faces of the same thing. The girlfriend pursuit, as it is commonly structured, quietly asks a man over 60 to trade the most valuable version of himself for a version that is more conventionally legible, more paired, more normal. And in making that trade, he gives up the exact qualities that would make a woman genuinely want to stay. You do not need to overanalyze this. You do not need to turn it into a system or a strategy. What you need is simply to notice, to begin paying attention to the moments when you are making yourself smaller in the hope that someone will find the smaller version more comfortable. Those are the moments that matter, because the man who stops making those trades, who chooses his own fullness over the performance of availability, is not a harder man to love. He is a rarer one, and rarity at this stage of life is the most magnetic thing you can be. Tell me in the comments, what is the one thing you have reclaimed about yourself since you stopped structuring your life around someone else's expectations? I read everyone, and if what I have shared today gave you a perspective you have not encountered before, consider subscribing, because this channel exists to give you exactly that kind of honest, inside perspective on how female psychology actually works, so that you can move through the world with clear eyes and full confidence. In the next video, I am going to show you exactly what a woman over 50 notices about a man within the first 90 seconds of meeting him, and why most men over 60 are erasing it before the conversation even begins.